So with that, we go to item 8, which is Newhall Community Facility, Newhall Farm, Stable Block, The Chase, Newhall, Harlow. Elizabeth.
Evening members of the public. Just bring this close. So the application before you is a change to the approved plans of the previously approved community centre at Newhall. And there we go. So the application site on the screen is edged in red, and you'll note from your report that it does have the benefit of planning permission, and there was a further revision to those plans. There we go, in the aerial of the site. This is a view from the north. This is the access from Sparrowhawk Way. So the proposed site plan is at the bottom, the approved is at the top, and what you're looking at is a 2.6 metre square increase in floor space to the kitchen, part of the community building, to improve the usability and the adaptability of the space. Everything else remains identical to the approved scheme, so what we're looking at is purely a very small extension to the kitchen area. Just looking at the layout plans, so it's in effect this area here, which is a very small kink there, which you can see in yellow on the right-hand plan there. And the existing and the approved elevations with the approved at top and the existing at the top and the proposed below. You can just see a slight change in the configuration on the below plan, just for that window. So the key issues are as listed in your report. So the principle of development is established by the extant planning consents. There's no other changes to the scheme with the exception of that very small 2.6 metre extension to improve the use of the actual building. The design and appearance officers consider as acceptable accords with policy PL1. You'll note the objections that have been received. All bar one of those relate to non-planning matters. They relate to issues of maintenance charge and issues of maintenance on Newhall as a whole. The only planning consideration that has been raised is in relation to noise and disturbance. Officers have considered that, but feel that given the very small extension increase, which is only 2.6, the increase in additional floor space is not sufficient enough to make the scheme unacceptable from those matters. And the application, therefore, members, is to grant planning permission subject to those conditions as listed in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Speakers, not in any particular order. Got Janie Dunn, if you'd like to come forward. You have 3 minutes, and if you press, is it the left-hand button? On your...
That one, yep. Okay, right. Sorry, where am I? Who was holding the? You were holding the timer. You actually did. Thank you. All right. So thank you for giving us the time tonight. So I want to address the design and layout, and that this is a conservation area and a building being restored and repurposed. And if I may request the committee to consider this objection and the further two you were here tonight as well, that comes from a place of a much wider community active action group support, and some of whom are able to amend plans and be here at short notice tonight. The key intention we would like for you to keep in mind in considering the objection is all the way along planning and approvals, the intention of this neighbourhood centre and the buildings in this section has solidly and been communicated consistently by Newhall projects and Harlow planning to the community, to Harlow residents and beyond for the last 20 years has always been for these neighbourhood centre buildings to be built for the primary benefits of the Newhall residents and the community, and for all these buildings of this section to be owned by the Newhall residents and community. And up until this amendment tonight that we review here, that has been the case. If I may for a moment bring in our direct similar comparative development being the farmland in Church Langley, at completion there is now 3,500 homes in total. Upon completion at halfway point in Newhall, we're at the 25-26 mark. There's about circa 2,000 plus homes. There's about another half of, well, the other half of that section to go, and at that point there'll be circa 4,000 homes in total, and that's going to be 2030s and when that's going to be finished. And this is important. The Church Langley Centre is a community building that has been kept by planning as a primary benefiting Church Langley residents community, fully owned and fully operated by the residents, no private company, no landowners. It has genuinely been provided and genuinely been built for the full and primary benefit of Church Langley residents, and the capacity of that is 225. Flip that coin, and Newhall proposed the community centre building that we're going to be built as a measly 100 capacity. And that's meant to provide for significantly more homes. There will be 4,000 plus homes at the end, with a growing family resident community. And this is important in terms of the key difference of those figures in terms of serving our community. And approval tonight for this amended application is no longer fit for purpose, as that application is very clearly no longer serving and to provide for the primary benefits and best interests of Newhall residents. And the reason for that is because this amended application has also been allowed to retain matters that impinge and become very serious breach of contractual obligation that Harlow Planning, Newhall Projects, multiple developers of the estate and residents have all had together for 20 years. This planning application amendment serves only to bolster the area size to increase the bottom line income of a private owned company. The neighbourhood centre buildings, save for the community centre, are all being requested as part of this application to be approved by planning for a change in ownership. Approval tonight will not only be seriously impinging on contractual obligations that we all have together and have already been made over the 20 years, and it will be overstepping the boundaries of those allowable matters that we are also being told that we're not allowed to include in terms of discussions this evening.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Ready? My name is Gemma. I am a Newhall resident of 5 years in the oldest part of the development, which is 20 years old. I and others do our bit to be good residents, attend meetings, report issues on the estate, pick up litter, support local businesses, pay service charges for a nice neighbourhood. In turn, I believe that the applicant has a responsibility to residents. I also believe that councillors have a duty of care to Harlow residents on managed estates like Newhall, residents at the mercy of private developers. Newhall has had no community centre for 2 decades. A community centre is a good thing, and I do not object to that principle today. The planning and community involvement statement in this application states that the community facility will include integration of the old dairy building, but in section 4 it states that the old dairy building will be retained by Newhall Projects in their ownership, a community facility that the community won't actually own. As a resident of Newhall, I don't believe that this is acceptable, and it raises some serious questions and concerns. Will the applicant get the income from the old dairy building, the meeting rooms, the electricity sold back to the grid from the solar panels? If the old dairy is part of the community centre, will we have to pay for its running cost while the applicant takes the income? Will the applicant charge the Residents' Association to hire the old dairy building facilities, even though it's supposed to be part of the community centre owned and run by the Residents' Association? Will the community centre costs as a whole be charged back to residents in service charges, which are continually increasing at a time when the cost of living has gone up? We've heard the planning officer's recommendations, and these concerns of residents have been pushed aside as matters not relevant to the review of this application. But the applicant made it relevant when they made what I consider to be a cynical attempt to use the process to assert ownership over what should rightly be owned by the community. Thanks to the failings of this applicant, Newhall has gone 20 years without a community centre, and this is how the applicant treats us. If matters of ownership are not matters for this application, then I ask councillors to break that link and insist that this application and supporting documents are amended to remove any statements addressing ownership of the community centre or any part thereof. When the residents of Gildon Park didn't get their community facilities, the council took a stand with residents and took the unprecedented action to get an injunction against the developer, and I applaud the council for doing so. I ask that councillors stand with the residents of Newhall today and help us ensure that the community facilities that we have waited so long for are there for the community and not for private profit. That such community facilities are indeed a benefit to residents and not a burden. As a resident of Newhall, I respectfully ask councillors to reject this application today with a requirement that the application be amended as I have stated before it will be reconsidered. Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. Are we loud? Okay. The various planning applications for the community facilities at Newhall Phase 1 have been based on it comprising of the community hall formed around the existing timber frame of the barn, obviously the new building, and the integration of the old dairy buildings. I'd like to draw your attention to the planning and community involvement statement that Savills prepared for Newhall projects dated June 2024, which is submitted in addition to support this application we're talking of tonight. I will now quote some key elements from that. Section 4.2 says that this minor proposed increase in floor space will maximise the community use of the building, making it more attractive to potential groups and organisations. The ability for the Residents' Association to let the space will generate a revenue stream to enable the hall to be managed and maintained for the benefit of all residents in the wider scheme. Section 4.5 states the old dairy building will be retained as part of the proposed scheme, although this will be retained by Newhall Projects Limited, and will provide meeting rooms, kitchen, toilet facilities, provision of PV, i.e. solar panels, which will provide the energy for the development's hot water and proportion of the electricity. End of my quotations. To my knowledge, there has not been any mention that Newhall Projects Limited will retain any legal ownership of any part of the community facilities at any of the previous stages of the planning approval process. I object to the approval of the amended plan application we are discussing this evening on the basis that Newhall Projects Limited's newly stated intention within this Savills Planning and Community Involvement Statement of June 2024 to retain the old dairy building and solar panels because, one, it materially affects the community facilities. Newhall residents will have no legal right to use or be in control of the use of the old dairy building, which obviously forms a key part of the community facilities, both in its design and as per the original planning application and approval. And secondly, because such retention can impact the financial status of the community facilities, for which residents, and we will be the Residents' Association, are financially responsible. By the Development Management Committee's own admission, it can not rule on any financial matters or any non-planning matters, and thus, the change of the old dairy's ownership status should void this application, with overall planning consent being reviewed and a consultation with residents held to address the material change in the community facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Chris Hatfield, for the applicant. Again, you have 3 minutes. Press the left button, I think it is. The left button doesn't really matter. The right button. Yeah. This one.
Right hand side.
That one. Yeah.
Right, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this application. I'm employed as project manager by Newhall Projects, who are the master developer for the Newhall scheme. I fully agree with your office's report and the comments made on page 7, in that this application is for 2.6 metre extension to a kitchen area over the community hall building already approved under a previous section 73 permission. This extension is about the size of a typical downstairs WC, and this further small amendment improves the functionality of this kitchen space for catering for community events. There are no other planning-related changes to the proposed building, and there will be no significant extra additional noise or construction vehicle movements related to this very minor change. This minor 2.6 metre extension does not materially alter the privacy of nearby dwellings, as pointed out by officers in their report. In relation to the other objections raised, as the officer points out, these are not planning matters. However, for clarity for members and officers, I would make the following comments. Newhall Projects has agreed with officers that the approved community building is circa 18% larger than that is legally required under the original 1996 Section 106 agreement, which required a building of 280 metres squared, and we are providing 330 metres squared. The larger building is being provided entirely at Newhall Projects' cost. The larger hall has been carefully designed to appeal to a wider audience with more flexibility for the use and income generation capability of the hall. The building materials chosen are very sustainable and have improved the carbon footprint over the originally consented scheme, and the building has been designed to minimise running costs by its very high quality construction specification. The objectors' concerns raised about the profitability of the hall are not planning matters. The future running costs, maintenance and income generation capabilities of the hall remain to be submitted by Newhall projects to your council under the new local centre section 106 agreement, and these will need to be approved by your council. The new section 106 agreement has already been agreed with officers of the council and your own solicitors. The dairy building being questioned by objectors is Newhall Project's existing office building, which is needed until the completion of the Newhall site in circa 2032. Newhall is absolutely not adverse to providing the use of parts of the dairy office building to the Newhall Residents Association once the hall is completed, but it does need to retain the flexibility to use this building for its current staff and its current use until completion of the development. I'd be happy to answer any questions or answer any clarifications, but I hope the comments I provided give comfort to some of the non-planning objections you've heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, questions and clarifications? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. I have to remind myself that we're focusing, or should be focusing, on this planning application in a planning committee fashion. No. We're also dealing with human beings, and it seems relationships. However, I think it would be useful to clarify a couple of things. One of the speakers referred to the council's duty of care, which is an interesting observation or possibly query. So, for the sake of clarity, do we have a duty of care? I know the answer, but I think it's important sometimes to get these things out in the open. A duty of care as described by one of the speakers, all of whom were extremely eloquent, incidentally.
Thank you, councillors. So, as you rightly say, councillors are elected members. They do have a duty of care, but we are considering planning applications under planning merits. So for the purposes of this forum, you can only consider planning merits.
Yes, that's fine, thank you. A couple more, 2 or 3 more, in fact. My interest was caught by several points that were made by the speakers, including the concerns and complications, it seems, that have been caused by what appear to be ownership issues and use of the centre. So are those concerns relevant? Excuse me if I'm saying things that are really incredibly obvious, and the answer is obvious, but sometimes people need to have their queries answered in public.
I'll take this one. So we're looking at the planning merits, which are matters of design, appearance, layout, etc. In terms of the use, it is a community centre. How it is run, how it is managed is not a planning matter. So what we're looking at are just the material planning considerations.
Just a couple more, Chair. And this application is very, very similar to one already approved, I understand. Again, for the sake of clarity, and although you will feel you are saying the same things over and over again, it would be very helpful if you could give us a bit of detail about those minor changes. What are they? Are the differences slight? What are the differences?
We had given them, the officer outlined them in her report, the minor changes, which was to the kitchen.
I can refer you to the slide up on the screen. So the left-hand layout plan shows what's been approved, and on the right-hand side you can see the very slight yellow shaded area, which is in effect levelling out a kink in the kitchen area to reconfigure the internal layout of the kitchen. Everything else, apart from the slight elevational changes to that kink, remains as the approved scheme.
And just for completion, councillor, it's 2.6 square metres that we're increasing the floor space by.
Another one?
And finally, often when we're dealing with construction, structural issues, and planning is part of our planning deliberations, we include a stipulation with regard to working hours. In this case, we don't have one. At least if we have, I haven't spotted it. So is there no need for that, given the location, given the slight amount of work? Is it not required?
Condition.
In effect, councillor, no, because obviously they can implement the approved consent without that. So in terms of adding additional conditions, they would need to meet the tests for attaching conditions in terms of reasonableness, proportionality, and for a 2.6 metre extension, it would be unreasonable to attach that as a condition.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any more questions or clarifications? No? So you're happy now? Debate. Debate. Anybody want to debate it? No? Can I just say a few words then? Okay. It's been many, many years trying to get this community centre built, and we finally got somewhere. I understand where the residents are concerned about the running of it, finances, but that's got nothing to do with us as a planning committee. All we can deal with tonight is, as been clarified, is the 2.6 metre alteration to the extent permission. So that's what we have to look at. We can't look at who owns it. We can't look at whether the financial arrangements or anything like that. So whilst part of us understand what you're saying, we can only deal with the planning application as it stands. Okay, so with that, no more comments? The recommendation is on page, and I've lost it again, page 13, which is to grant planning permission. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Unanimous.
Yeah, there's a supplementary.
What do you want?
That's for layman's.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.